In polite society, love is rarely spoken of. But when it is almost never honest. They called it an arrangement, a kindness, a mercy, even. For Miss Catherine Goodwin, no vows were spoken, no promises written, only expectations, carefully unspoken, yet strictly enforced. She agreed to remain unseen, to love without a name, to belong to a man who would never stand beside her in the light of day. And for a time, she told herself that affection was enough, that being chosen in private was better than being alone in public. But there is a cost to invisibility, and it is always paid by the one who agrees to disappear. This is not a story about scandal. It is a story about self-betrayal, about the quiet moment when a woman realizes that love should never require her to shrink. This is the story of the woman who agreed to be the Duke's mistress and learned the cost of being unseen. Before we begin, if you've ever stayed where you were tolerated instead of cherished, if you've ever accepted silence as the price of being chosen, then you already understand what this costs her. Consider liking the video and subscribing. It means more than you know. Tell me where you are listening from, and what hour of the day has brought you here. I will read every comment. Now, let us continue. Some lessons are only learned by watching someone finally walk away. Miss Catherine Goodwin understood this perhaps better than most. She had lived long enough on the margins of society to know that honesty was a luxury reserved for those who could afford the consequences. She was not beautiful in the way that turned heads at assemblies. Her features were pleasant, her manner unremarkable. She possessed no fortune, no title, no connections that might elevate her beyond what she was, a gentlewoman of modest birth, educated enough to be acceptable company, poor enough to be easily overlooked. This particular evening, she sat in the drawing-room of her cousin's London townhouse, pretending to read. The lamplight was kind to her complexion, though she suspected no one noticed. Her cousin's guests never did. The Duke of Hawthorne noticed. He had been watching her for some weeks now, discreetly, as men of his position do when they wish to remain unobserved. Catherine had felt his attention like a change in atmospheric pressure. It made her uneasy. Men like him did not look at women like her unless they wanted something. When he approached her that evening, she did not feign surprise. "Miss Goodwin," he said, his voice low and measured. "Might I have a word?" She set down her book and rose. They stepped into the adjoining parlor, where the noise of the gathering dimmed to a polite murmur. He did not close the door entirely. Propriety still mattered, even in private negotiations. Augustus Hawthorne was handsome in the way powerful men often are, not from symmetry alone, but from the confidence that comes with never being refused. His dark hair was neatly arranged, his cravat impeccable. When he smiled, it did not quite reach his eyes. "I will not insult your intelligence with pretense," he began. "You are a woman of sense. I believe we understand one another." Catherine folded her hands. "I am listening, Your Grace." He moved closer, though not so close as to alarm. Everything about him was calibrated. "You are without protection, without prospects." "That is not a criticism, merely an observation." "It is accurate," she replied quietly. "I am in a position to offer you comfort, security, companionship." He paused, allowing the words to settle. "I would see that you are well provided for. You would want for nothing." She did not ask him to clarify. She knew what he was offering, what he was not offering. And in exchange, her voice remained steady. "Discretion," he said simply. "I value my privacy. As would you, I imagine." There it was. The word that meant everything and nothing. Discretion. It sounded dignified, respectful, even. But Catherine understood its true meaning, invisibility. She would be his in private, a stranger to him in public. No acknowledgment, no claim, no future. She should have refused. But she was tired. Tired of being overlooked, of surviving on charity, of watching younger, wealthier women receive what she never would. and he was looking at her as though she mattered. "I would need time to consider," she said. "Of course." His smile returned, warmer now. "Take all the time you require. Though I hope you will not take too long." He left her standing in the dim parlor, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. Catherine returned to her seat, picked up a book, and did not read a single word. 3 days later, she accepted. She told herself it was pragmatic, realistic, a choice made with open eyes. She did not tell herself it was love. Not yet. Catherine's new residence was tasteful. That was the word for it. Tasteful. A modest townhouse in a quiet square where neighbors did not ask questions. The furnishings were elegant without being ostentatious. The staff, a housekeeper, a maid, a cook, were polite and incurious. Everything had been arranged before she arrived. Augustus had thought of everything. The linens were fine, the larder well stocked. There were books in the sitting room, chosen with care, poetry, novels, a volume of essays. He had noticed what she read. She ought to have been grateful. She was grateful. And yet, standing in the entrance hall that first morning, valise still in hand, Catherine felt the walls close in just slightly. This was a beautiful cage, and she had walked into it willingly. The housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan, appeared with tea and a practised smile. "His Grace has seen to your comfort, miss. If there is anything you require, you need only ask." "Thank you," Catherine said. Mrs. Brennan did not meet her eyes for long. That would become a pattern. The days acquired a rhythm. Augustus visited in the evenings, when the streets were dim and his carriage unmarked. He was attentive, affectionate, even. They dined together, spoke of books and music, and for hours at a time, Catherine could almost forget the terms of their arrangement. But he never stayed the night. "It would not do," he said once, when she asked. "People notice patterns." She did not ask again. There were gifts. A shawl of fine cashmere. A necklace she could not wear in public. Once, a painting, small, exquisite, unsigned. He watched her face when she unwrapped it, pleased by her delight. "You have excellent taste," she said. "So do you," he replied, though what he meant, precisely, she could not say. The invitations stopped arriving. Not that there had been many, her cousin's circle had never fully embraced her. But now, even those few dried up entirely. No one called. No one wrote. Catherine told herself it did not matter. She had chosen this. But some mornings, sitting alone in the pretty parlor with nothing to occupy her hands, she felt the silence press against her skin. She began taking walks. Short ones, at first, around the square, to the park. She kept her head down, her bonnet pulled low. Once, she saw a woman she recognized from her cousin's drawing room. The woman's gaze slid past her as though she were invisible. Catherine quickened her pace and did not look back. One evening, Augustus arrived later than usual. He was distracted, his cravat slightly loosened. She poured him wine and waited. "There is to be a ball," he said finally, "at Wycliffe House. Next month." Catherine set down her glass carefully. "I see. It is expected that I attend." He did not look at her. "The season is beginning. There will be obligations." She understood. He would be seen. He would dance with eligible young women, smile at ambitious mothers, play the role society demanded of him. And she would remain here, in this tasteful house, waiting. "Of course," she said quietly. He reached for her hand. "You know how society is, Catherine. If there were another way." "I know." She did not pull away. But something inside her went still. Later, after he had left, she stood at the window and watched the lamplighters make their rounds. The city glowed softly in the dusk, full of people going about their lives. Visible lives. She drew the curtains and turned away. The gifts continued. The visits continued. But Catherine began to notice the edges of things. The way he never mentioned her name in his letters. The way his affection was warmest when the doors were locked. The way he spoke of the future in careful abstractions, never including her in the telling. She was learning what it meant to be loved in the margins. And already, without quite realizing it, she was beginning to shrink. Spring arrived, and with it, the full bloom of the season. Catherine heard about it second-hand. Mrs. Brennan mentioned it while arranging flowers, how the streets were choked with carriages, how the modistes were working day and night. The maid, Mary, spoke of the grand houses lit up like jewel boxes, music spilling into the night air. Catherine listened and said nothing. Augustus came less frequently now. His visits grew shorter, his attention divided. He arrived with apologies already forming on his lips. "Forgive me," he said one evening, barely through the door. "I cannot stay long. There is a supper I must attend." She had prepared for the evening, worn the dress he liked, arranged her hair with care. "Of course," she said, and meant it to sound easy. It came out hollow instead. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt more like dismissal than affection, and was gone within the hour. Catherine stood in the empty parlor and wondered when she had started measuring her life in the spaces between his arrivals. She began to organize her days around his absence. Morning, reading, though she often found herself staring at the same page for an hour. Afternoon, needlework she did not need, letters she did not send. Evening, waiting. Always waiting. The house, so tastefully appointed, became oppressive in its stillness. She knew every creak of the floorboards, every shadow the lamp cast. She could predict Mrs. Brennan's movements to the minute. Some days, Catherine felt as though she were fading into the wallpaper. One afternoon, restless and half desperate for air, she ventured farther than usual. She walked to the Thames, watched the boats glide past, studied the faces of strangers who did not know her name. A woman bumped into her, young, stylishly dressed, laughing with her companion. "Oh, pardon me," the woman said, but her eyes were already moving past Catherine, seeing nothing of consequence. Catherine murmured something polite and stepped aside. She used to be someone people saw. Not important, perhaps, but present. Acknowledged. Now she was learning to disappear. That night, Augustus arrived in good spirits. He had news of a successful vote in Parliament, a witty exchange at his club. He talked and Catherine listened, as she always did. She wanted to ask, "Do you think of me when you are there? Do you mention me to anyone? Does anyone know I exist?" Instead, she smiled and poured more wine. "You are quiet tonight," he observed. "Am I?" She smoothed her skirt. "I suppose I have little to report. My days are rather uniform." Something flickered in his expression, guilt, perhaps, or irritation. She could not tell. "You are content here, are you not?" It was phrased as a question but delivered as a statement. "You have everything you need." "Everything but a future." "Yes," Catherine said. "I am content." He seemed satisfied. He reached for her hand, pressed it to his lips. She felt nothing. No, that was not quite true. She felt the absence of something. The hollow where hope used to live. Later, alone again, Catherine stood before the mirror in her bedchamber. The woman looking back at her was well-fed, well-dressed, well-kept. Comfortable. Empty. She thought of the girl she had been a year ago, lonely, yes, but still visible. Still hoping for something more than this elegant captivity. That girl would not recognize her now. Catherine turned from the mirror and extinguished the lamp. In the darkness, she could almost pretend she had made the right choice. Almost. Summer settled over London like a weight. Catherine had been Augustus's mistress for nearly 6 months. Long enough to know the pattern of his visits, the rhythm of his affections, the careful geography of their arrangement. Long enough to begin imagining what came next. It was a dangerous habit, she knew. But the mind wanders when left too long in stillness, and hers had begun constructing futures she had no right to expect. She pictured a small ceremony. Nothing grand, she was realistic. But perhaps something quiet, something that would give her a name she could speak aloud. A place at his side, even a modest one. She knew better than to voice these thoughts. Until one evening, when the words escaped before she could stop them. Augustus was in good humor. He had brought champagne, French, expensive, and they sat together in the fading light. For once, he seemed unhurried. Catherine felt brave. Or perhaps just reckless. "Augustus," she began carefully, "have you given any thought to what might happen in time?" He glanced at her, amused. "In time? To us?" She kept her voice light. "Our arrangement. Whether it might evolve." The amusement faded. Not into anger, that would have been easier to read. Into something more guarded. "Evolve," he repeated, as though tasting the word. Catherine's courage faltered, but she pressed on. "I only mean, 6 months is not insignificant. And I wondered if you had considered whether we might eventually marry." The word hung between them like a stone. "Yes," she said quietly. Augustus set down his glass with deliberate care. When he spoke, his tone was gentle. Too gentle. "Catherine, you must know that is impossible." "Why?" The question surprised them both. He leaned back, studying her as one might study a puzzle that had suddenly revealed an unexpected complication. "Because I am a duke. Because my family has expectations. Because marriage is not a matter of affection, it is a matter of alliance, of lineage, of suitability," she finished for him. "Precisely." She felt something crack inside her chest. Small. Hairline. Easily ignored if one tried hard enough. "I see." "Do you?" He reached for her hand, his expression earnest now. Concerned. "Catherine, what we have, it is far freer than marriage could ever be. You are not bound by the tedious obligations of a duchess. You have no tiresome social duties, no mothers-in-law to appease, no public scrutiny. You are hidden," she said. "Protected," he corrected smoothly. "From all the unpleasantness that comes with visibility." She looked at their joined hands. His grip was firm. Possessive. "And you benefit from this protection as well," she said slowly. "Do you not?" His fingers tightened, just slightly. "I would not put it so crudely." "How would you put it?" For a moment, something almost like irritation crossed his face. But he smoothed it away with the same practiced ease he applied to everything. "I would say that we have an understanding. One that serves us both. You are cared for. I am content. Why complicate it with impossible expectations?" Impossible. There was the truth of it. Not difficult. Not complicated. Impossible. She withdrew her hand gently. "Of course. Forgive me. I was being foolish." "Not foolish," he said, too quickly. "Simply unrealistic." He stayed another hour. Talked of other things. Kissed her when he left. But Catherine barely heard him. She was too busy calculating how many times she had edited herself, swallowed questions, arranged her face into contentment. How many more times she would be expected to do so. After he left, she sat in the parlor until the candles burned low. "You are freer this way," he had said. But freedom, Catherine thought, should not feel quite so much like disappearing. The invitation arrived by mistake. Catherine found it on the hall table one morning, mixed among Augustus's correspondence that Mrs. Brennan had left for his next visit. Heavy card stock, gilt-edged. An invitation to the Pemberton ball. She held it for a moment before setting it down carefully, as though it might burn her. Augustus would attend, of course. He always did. She would not. The evening of the ball, Catherine told herself she would not think about it. She took dinner early, attempted to read, considered an early night. By 9 o'clock, she was standing at her bedroom window, watching carriages roll past in the distance. The Pemberton house was only 3 streets away, close enough to hear the faint strains of music when the wind shifted. She imagined him there, dancing, smiling, being seen. She drew the curtains. But an hour later, restless and foolish, she found herself dressed and walking. Just to the corner, she told herself. Just for air. The night was warm, the streets busy with traffic heading toward Mayfair's illuminated squares. Catherine kept to the shadows, her cloak pulled close. She should not have gone. But she walked until she could see it, the Pemberton house ablaze with light, carriages queuing, liveried footmen handing ladies down onto red carpet. Music and laughter spilled from open windows. The whole glittering machinery of society on display. And there, stepping down from his carriage, Augustus. Catherine stopped breathing. He looked magnificent. Perfectly tailored, perfectly composed. He offered his arm to someone emerging behind him. A woman. Young, fair-haired, exquisitely dressed. She took his arm with easy grace, laughing at something he said. They walked into the house together. Catherine stood frozen on the pavement, watching the door close behind them. She had known, of course. Known he attended these events. Known there would be other women, suitable women, marriageable women. But knowing and seeing were different species of pain. She turned and walked back the way she had come, her footsteps quick and unsteady. He came to her 3 days later, cheerful and unhurried. "You are well?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Quite well." He spoke of the ball as though it were nothing. "Tedious," he said. "Overcrowded. The music mediocre at best." Catherine listened with her hands folded in her lap. "There was a young lady," he continued, examining the wine she had poured. "The Earl of Ashton's daughter. Pleasant enough, I suppose. Her mother is absurdly ambitious." Catherine's throat tightened. Was she, the fair-haired woman? He glanced up, surprised. "You know of her?" "I." She faltered. "I happened to be near the house that evening. I saw you arrive." The room went very still. Augustus set down his glass slowly. "You were watching." It was not a question. "I was walking," she said quietly. "I did not intend." "Catherine." His voice was soft. "Dangerous. You cannot do that." "I was not seen. I only—" "That is not the point." He stood, pacing now. "If anyone had noticed you, if anyone had connected you to me, do you understand what that would mean? No one saw me. You cannot know that." He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something cold in his expression. "This arrangement depends on discretion, on invisibility. If you compromise that—" "I compromised nothing," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I stood on a public street and watched people enter a house. That is all." "That is not all, and you know it." They stared at each other across the small, tasteful parlor. "Who was she?" Catherine asked finally. Augustus's jaw tightened. "No one of consequence." "You arrived with her." "I arrived with half the party. Her father is influential. It was expected." "Expected," Catherine repeated. "And will you be expected to dance with her as well? To court her?" "If necessary." He said it flatly, without apology. Catherine felt the crack in her chest widen. "I see." "Catherine," he softened, reaching for her. "You knew what this was. What I could offer. I have never lied to you." No. He had not lied. He had simply told her she should be grateful for the shadows. He left earlier than usual that night. Catherine stood at the window again, watching his carriage disappear into the dark. She had existed for him in firelight and closed rooms. But out there, in the world that mattered, she was no one. She would always be no one. The realization did not arrive as shock. It settled over her like frost. Quiet. Cold. Inevitable. Augustus did not visit for a week. Catherine told herself it was coincidence. Parliament was in session. There were obligations. She knew this. But when he finally arrived, he brought flowers, expensive, out of season, and his smile was carefully arranged. She knew that smile. It was the one he used when he wanted something forgiven without having to apologize for it. "I have missed you," he said, kissing her hand. Catherine accepted the flowers and rang for Mrs. Brennan to arrange them. She did not say she had missed him too, because she was not certain it was true anymore. They dined together. He was charming, attentive, asking after her reading, her health, her days. All the polite inquiries of a man visiting someone he kept. It was only afterward, when they sat together in the parlor, that the carefully maintained ease began to fracture. "I have been thinking," Augustus said, swirling brandy in his glass, "about our last conversation." Catherine's hands stilled in her lap. "Oh, you were distressed. I regret that." He paused. "But I think perhaps we should clarify certain understandings." Something in his tone made her wary. What understandings? He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. His expression was gentle, reasonable. "Catherine, you are an intelligent woman. I have always admired that about you. So I think we should speak plainly." "Please do." "Marriage was never part of our arrangement." He said it carefully, as though explaining something to a child. "You knew this from the beginning. I have been generous, more than generous. This house, your comfort, your security, these are not small things. I am aware. Then you must understand that certain expectations are unreasonable." The words landed like stones. Catherine drew a slow breath. "What expectations, precisely?" "The expectation that I account for my movements, that I limit my social engagements, that I—" He hesitated, choosing his words. "That I treat this as something other than what it is." "And what is it?" The question seemed to surprise him. "A mutually beneficial arrangement," he said finally. "One in which you are protected, provided for, and free from the harsh judgments of society." "Protected," Catherine repeated. "By being hidden. By being discreet." His patience was beginning to fray. "Catherine, you seem determined to misunderstand. Do you have any idea what would happen to you if this became public? You would be ruined. Utterly. No decent household would receive you. No respectable woman would acknowledge you. I am already not acknowledged. Because you are safe here. Because I have ensured you remain apart from the cruelty of—" "You have ensured," she interrupted quietly, "that I remain apart from everything." Augustus stood abruptly. "You are being irrational." "Am I?" "Yes." He began to pace. "I have given you more than most women in your position could ever hope for. You have comfort, security, my affection. What more could you possibly want?" The answer rose in her throat, unbidden and dangerous. To be chosen in daylight. To be acknowledged. To matter. But she did not say it. Because she could see in his face that he already knew. And that he considered it unreasonable. "Catherine." His voice softened. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. You must be practical. You are not a girl anymore. Your circumstances were limited. If I had not offered you this arrangement, where would you be now?" She stared at their joined hands. "You would still be dependent on your cousin's charity. Still overlooked, still unwanted. I gave you an alternative. A life. And yes, it requires discretion, but that is the price of—" "The price of what?" He hesitated. "Then, of being loved by someone like me." The words should have sounded romantic. Instead, they sounded like a bill of sale. Catherine withdrew her hands gently. "And if I no longer wish to pay that price?" The room went cold. Augustus rose slowly, his expression hardening. "What are you saying?" "I am asking what happens if I choose to leave." "Leave?" He said it as though the word were foreign. And go where, exactly? To what? You have nothing, Catherine. No family who wants you, no prospects, no reputation left to salvage. I am the only thing standing between you and complete ruin. There it was. The truth he had been circling all along. She was not protected. She was trapped. You should be grateful, he continued, his voice rising slightly. Most men would not be so constant, so generous. You could have been cast aside months ago, left with nothing. Instead, I have been faithful. In private, she said. What? You have been faithful in private. In public, I do not exist. His face flushed. That is how these arrangements work. You knew that. You agreed. I did. Then what is this petulance? This sudden dissatisfaction? Catherine stood, meeting his eyes. It is not sudden. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another. I have been more than fair, Augustus said finally. His voice had gone cold. If you are too foolish to see that, then perhaps you are not as intelligent as I believed. He collected his coat, moved toward the door. No one else will want you, he said without turning around. You know that, don't you? You are ruined now. I made certain you would be comfortable in that ruin. But make no mistake, you are ruined nonetheless. The door closed behind him. Catherine stood alone in the tasteful parlor, surrounded by gifts and fine things and absolute silence. And she understood, finally, the bargain she had made. She had traded herself for the illusion of being loved. And the cost was everything. The moment of clarity. Catherine did not sleep that night. She sat in the dark parlor, watching shadows shift across the walls, replaying every word. Not just from that evening, but from all the months before. Every careful phrase, every gentle redirection, every moment she had convinced herself that patience would be rewarded. No one else will want you. The words circled her mind like carrion birds. He had not said it cruelly. That was the worst part. He had said it as fact. As kindness, even, a reminder of reality, of her place, of what she should be grateful for. By dawn, something in her had shifted. It was not anger. Anger would have been simpler, hotter, easier to dismiss. This was colder, clearer. She saw herself as though from a distance, a woman who had spent 6 months arranging her entire existence around a man who would not stand beside her in daylight. Who had learned to be grateful for scraps of attention. Who had made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that diminishment might be mistaken for love. She had done this to herself. And she could undo it. The days that followed were strange. Augustus did not visit, and Catherine did not expect him to. He was punishing her with absence, a tactic that would have worked a month ago. Now, she found she could breathe more easily without him. She walked. Long walks, aimless ones, through parts of London she had never seen. She watched people, couples strolling openly, women shopping with friends, families moving through the world without hiding. No one noticed her particularly, but no one ignored her either. She was simply there, present, visible in the ordinary way of ordinary people. It was unremarkable. It was glorious. One afternoon, she stopped in a small park and sat on a bench. An elderly woman sat nearby, feeding pigeons. After a moment, the woman glanced over. "Lovely day," she said. Catherine blinked. It was such a small thing. A pleasantry between strangers. "Yes," she replied. "It is." The woman smiled and returned to her birds. Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. When was the last time someone had spoken to her simply because she was there? Not because they were paid to serve her, not because they wanted something from her, but because she existed in the world alongside them? She could not remember. That evening, she sat at the small writing desk in her room and took inventory. She had a little money saved, not much, but enough for a few months if she was careful. Augustus had been generous with household accounts, she had been frugal. She had no family who would take her in. Her cousin had made that abundantly clear through silence. She had no prospects, no references, no respectable position to return to. She had, by every practical measure, nothing. And yet, she looked around the tasteful room, at the expensive furnishings and fine linens, at all the beautiful trappings of her captivity. She could leave. The thought arrived fully formed, and with it, a startling sense of calm. She could leave, and the worst that would happen, the very worst, is that she would be poor and alone and struggling. She was already alone. The poverty would simply be more honest. Augustus returned a week later, as she knew he would. He brought gifts, books this time, and a new shawl. His manner was pleasant but reserved. He was waiting, she realized, for her to apologize, to acknowledge that she had been unreasonable, to return to the script. She poured tea and let him talk. He spoke of Parliament, of a tedious dinner party, of his plans for the autumn. All surface, no substance. He did not mention their argument, did not acknowledge the weapon he had wielded. Finally, he paused and looked at her expectantly. "You are very quiet today." Catherine set down her cup. "I have been thinking." "Oh." A hint of weariness crept into his voice. "About what you said. That I should be grateful." She kept her tone even. "You were right. I should have been clearer about my own expectations." He relaxed slightly. "I am glad you see reason. I knew you would, given time. You are too sensible for prolonged dramatics. I am leaving." The words were simple, declarative, final. Augustus went very still. "Leaving?" "Yes." "Don't be absurd." He smiled, but it was tight. "Where would you go?" "I will find something. A position, perhaps. A room somewhere." "Catherine." He set down his cup sharply. "This is foolishness. You have nothing. You are nothing without." He stopped himself. "Without you," she finished quietly. "Yes. You have made that very clear." "I did not mean." "You meant precisely that." She stood, crossing to the window. "And perhaps it is even true. Perhaps I am ruined, and poor, and without prospects. But I would rather be nothing in my own right than something that exists only in your margins." "You are being hysterical." "I am being clear." He stood as well, his composure cracking. "I have given you everything. This house, your comfort, my time." "Your time," she repeated. "An hour here, an evening there, always in the dark, always in secret. Never when it mattered. Never where anyone could see." That was the agreement. It was. Catherine turned to face him. "And I am ending it." He tried everything then. "Reason, be practical. You will not survive a week on your own. Guilt, after all I have done for you. After I saved you from destitution. Tenderness, Catherine, please. I care for you. Surely you know that." She listened to it all with the strange detachment of someone watching a play they had already seen. Finally, he grew angry. "If you leave, you will have nothing. No one will help you. No one will want you. You will end up in some dreadful situation, and when you come crawling back—" "I will not come back," Catherine said. The certainty in her voice stopped him. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another. The Duke and the woman he had kept. The man who thought he owned her and the woman who had finally realized he did not. "You will regret this," he said quietly. "Perhaps," Catherine replied. "But it will be my regret. Not yours." He left without another word. Catherine stood in the center of the parlor, surrounded by all the tasteful evidence of her erasure, and felt something she had not felt in months. She felt like herself. Catherine packed lightly. 1 trunk. 2 carpet bags. The essentials only, clothing, a few books, her mother's locket. She left behind the expensive shawls, the jewelry, the painting. They had never truly been hers. Mrs. Brennan watched from the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Will you be needing a reference, miss?" Catherine paused. A reference from a duke's mistress's housekeeper would raise more questions than it answered. "No, thank you." Mrs. Brennan nodded. She had worked in enough great houses to understand discretion. "I wish you well, miss." It was, Catherine thought, the kindest thing anyone had said to her in months. She had found modest lodgings through a registry, a boarding house in Bloomsbury run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. 2 rooms on the 3rd floor. Clean, sparse, respectable. The rent was more than she could truly afford, but she would manage. She always had. The morning she left, she walked through the townhouse one final time. It was beautiful, this cage. Tasteful and elegant and utterly hollow. She did not look back. The boarding house was a different world entirely. The rooms were plain, whitewashed walls, simple furniture, a single window overlooking a narrow street. There was no housekeeper, no maid. Catherine made her own bed, carried her own water. It was liberating. Mrs. Fletcher was a practical woman in her 50s, brisk and unsentimental. She asked no questions about Catherine's circumstances, only whether the rent would be paid on time. "First of each month," she said. "No exceptions." "Of course." "Good. Breakfast is at 7. You may take tea in your room, but no guests after 8. Catherine almost smiled. Guests. As though she had any. The first week was the hardest. Not because of the work. Catherine had never been afraid of work. But because the silence was so complete. No visits to anticipate. No one to dress for. No routine shaped around another person's schedule. She was entirely, absolutely alone. Some mornings, she woke disoriented, forgetting where she was. Then she would see the plain walls, hear the sounds of the boarding house stirring, and remember. She had chosen this. The reminder steadied her. She began looking for work. It was harder than she expected. She had no recent references, no connections, no trade. The positions available to women of uncertain background were limited: governess, companion, seamstress. She tried first for a governess position, but the interview went poorly. The prospective employer, a merchant's wife with social aspirations, took one look at Catherine's worn gloves and tired eyes and made her excuses. "We require someone with more current experience." Catherine understood. She looked like what she was, a woman who had fallen and was trying to climb back up. A week passed. Then 2. Her savings dwindled. She took in mending to supplement them, sitting by candlelight until her eyes ached, stitching hems for women who did not look at her face. One evening, Mrs. Fletcher knocked on her door. "A letter for you, Miss Goodwin." Catherine's heart seized. She recognized the handwriting immediately. She waited until Mrs. Fletcher had gone before opening it. The letter was brief. Augustus's hand, though unsigned. "Catherine, I trust you have had sufficient time to reconsider. The house remains available, should you wish to return. I am prepared to overlook this incident if you demonstrate appropriate gratitude. I expect your response within the week. No apology. No acknowledgment of her reasons for leaving. Just the assumption that poverty would drive her back." Catherine read it twice, then held it to the candle flame. She watched it burn. The next morning, she woke with a clarity that felt almost like joy. She was poor, uncertain, struggling. But she was not his. She dressed carefully in her one good dress, plain, but clean and well-maintained. She pinned her hair simply. She looked in the small mirror and saw a woman who was present. Visible. Real. She had no idea what would happen next. No certainty of success. No promise of rescue. But she had something she had not possessed in the Duke's elegant townhouse. She had herself back. And that, Catherine thought as she descended the stairs to face another day of searching, was worth everything she had left behind. Catherine did not respond to the letter, nor to the second one that arrived a week later, more insistent in tone, or the third, which carried the faint edge of irritation beneath its measured words. Augustus, it seemed, was unaccustomed to being ignored. She burned each letter without reading past the first lines. There was nothing he could say that would change her mind. Nothing he could offer that was worth the cost. A month passed. Then one evening, there was a knock at her door. Not Mrs. Fletcher's polite tap. Something heavier, more deliberate. Catherine opened it to find Augustus standing in the narrow hallway, looking entirely out of place among the peeling wallpaper and worn floorboards. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He had not expected to come here. Had not expected to be reduced to this. "May I come in?" It was not really a question. Catherine stepped aside. He looked around the small room with poorly concealed distaste. The narrow bed, the simple washstand, the single chair by the window where she did her mending. "This is where you have been living?" "Yes." "Catherine." He turned to her, and for a moment, something almost like genuine concern crossed his face. "This is beneath you." "Is it?" "You know it is." He moved closer. "Whatever point you were trying to make, you have made it. You have demonstrated your independence. Now come home. Let us put this foolishness behind us." "This is not foolishness." "Then what would you call it?" His patience was fraying. "Pride? Stubbornness? You are living in squalor when you could be comfortable, when you could be cared for." "I am caring for myself." "Barely." He gestured at the room. "How long can you sustain this?" "A month. 2. What happens when your money runs out? When you cannot find work? What then?" Catherine folded her hands. "I will manage." "You will fail." He said it flatly. "And when you do, I may not be there to catch you." It was a threat, delicately phrased. "I am not asking you to catch me." Augustus exhaled sharply. "What do you want, Catherine? Tell me. What would it take for you to stop this performance?" The answer came clearly, without hesitation. "Marry me." The silence that followed was absolute. He stared at her as though she had spoken in a foreign language. "You cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious." "Catherine, you say you care for me. Prove it. Not in darkness, not in secret. Marry me. Stand beside me in daylight. Give me your name." His face hardened. "That is impossible." "Why?" "You know why." "Tell me anyway." She kept her voice steady. "Explain to me why the woman you claim to care for is not worthy of being your wife." "This is not about worth." "Then what is it about?" He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You are being unreasonable. Marriage is not, it is not a matter of sentiment. There are considerations, expectations. My family, my position." "Your reputation," Catherine finished quietly. "Yes." He faced her again. "Yes, my reputation. And yours, though you seem determined to destroy it." "I have no reputation left to destroy. You made certain of that." "I protected you." "You hid me." Her voice rose, just slightly. "You kept me like a secret, like something shameful. And now you stand in my room and tell me I should be grateful for it. I gave you everything I could. Everything but respect. Everything but acknowledgment. Everything but a future." Augustus's composure cracked. "What future did you have before me? You were nothing. No one. I elevated you, gave you comfort, gave me." Catherine's calm finally broke. "You gave me a beautiful prison and called it kindness. You gave me affection with conditions and called it love. You gave me just enough to survive and expected eternal gratitude. That is unfair." "Is it?" They faced each other across the small room, the Duke in his expensive coat, the woman in her threadbare dress. The man who thought he was being generous. The woman who had finally learned the difference between generosity and control. "I will not marry you," Augustus said finally. His voice was cold. Final. "I cannot. And if you had any sense, you would stop asking." "Then I will not return." "Catherine." "Those are my terms," she said quietly. "Marriage, or I remain here. There is no third option." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing, considering whether she might be bluffing. She was not. "You are making a mistake," he said finally. "Perhaps. You will regret this. I have already told you, it will be my regret to bear." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I could help you, you know. If you would simply be reasonable. I could find you a position. Ensure you are settled somewhere respectable. But not if you persist in this delusion. I do not want your help." "Then you are a fool." He left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Catherine stood in the center of her small room, listening to the sound of his carriage pulling away. Her hands were shaking. But she did not cry. She had asked for what she deserved. He had refused. And now, finally, she was free to leave him behind. 6 months passed. Catherine learned to survive on very little. She took work where she could find it, mending, copying letters, occasional tutoring for the children of shopkeepers who could not afford a proper governess. The work was irregular and poorly paid, but it was hers. She grew thinner. Her dresses became more worn. But something else changed too. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for so long gradually eased. She could walk where she pleased. Speak to whom she chose. Exist without permission. It was a small life. A hard life. But it was honest. The letter came on a Tuesday. Catherine recognized the handwriting immediately, not Augustus's, but her aunt's. Her mother's elder sister, whom she had not heard from in nearly 2 years. She opened it with trembling hands. "My dear Catherine, I have heard through certain channels of your altered circumstances. I will not pretend to understand the choices that led you there, nor do I require explanation. What is done is done. However, I find myself in need of assistance. My health is not what it was, and I require a companion for the season. The position would include lodging in my London residence and a modest salary. More importantly, it would provide you with an opportunity to re-enter society in a respectable capacity. I make no judgment on your past. I offer only a future, should you wish to accept it. Your aunt, Lady Pembroke." Catherine read the letter 3 times. Her aunt was offering her a lifeline. Not from kindness, perhaps. Lady Pembroke was too practical for sentiment. But from pragmatism. She needed help, and Catherine needed respectability. It was a transaction, but an honest one. Catherine wrote her acceptance that evening. Lady Pembroke's London house was grand in the way of old money, elegant without ostentation, comfortable without excess. Catherine arrived with her single trunk and was shown to a modest but pleasant room on the 2nd floor. Her aunt received her in the drawing-room. Lady Pembroke was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and straight-backed despite her age. She looked Catherine over with the assessing gaze of someone taking inventory. "You look thin." "I have been economizing." "Clearly." Her aunt gestured to a chair. "Sit. We must establish terms." "Catherine, Saturday. You will accompany me to social engagements as required. You will manage my correspondence, read to me when my eyes tire, and generally make yourself useful. In exchange, you will have room, board, and £20 per annum. You will also have the benefit of being seen in respectable company, which I suspect is worth more to you than the salary." "Yes, Good. Now," Lady Pembroke fixed her with a steady look. "I do not require details of your recent past. But I will not tolerate scandal. If any associations from that period attempt to interfere with your duties here, you will manage them discreetly. Do you understand?" Catherine understood perfectly. Her aunt knew enough. but discretion would be maintained on both sides. I understand. Excellent. We attend Lady Haverstock's musicale tomorrow evening. You will need a proper dress. I will have my modiste send something suitable. The musicale was Catherine's first public appearance in nearly a year. She dressed carefully in the gown her aunt had provided, simple, elegant, appropriate for a companion. She pinned her hair conservatively. She looked respectable, invisible in the right way. The assembled company was smaller than the grand balls she remembered from her time with Augustus, but still formidable. Titled families, wealthy merchants, politicians and their wives. The machinery of society in gentler motion. Catherine stayed close to her aunt, spoke when spoken to, made herself quietly useful. And then she saw him. Augustus stood across the room, talking with an older gentleman. He had not yet noticed her. His attention was focused on his companion, his expression polite and engaged. Catherine's heart hammered, but she did not look away. Lady Pembroke followed her gaze, then glanced at Catherine with raised eyebrows. "Compose yourself," her aunt murmured. Catherine nodded, drew a breath, lifted her chin. When Augustus finally turned and saw her, his expression froze. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another across the crowded room. The Duke who had expected her to fail. The woman who had survived anyway. Catherine inclined her head politely, the greeting one might give an acquaintance of no particular consequence. Then she turned back to her aunt and continued their conversation as though nothing had happened. Later, as they prepared to leave, Augustus approached. "Lady Pembroke," he said, bowing. "A pleasure, as always." "Your Grace." Her aunt's tone was cordial but cool. His eyes shifted to Catherine. "Miss Goodwin, I had not realized you were in London." "I am recently arrived," Catherine replied evenly. "I am serving as companion to my aunt." "I see." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. "I trust you are well." "Quite well, thank you." The conversation was perfectly polite, perfectly cold. "If you will excuse us, Your Grace," Lady Pembroke said. "We have another engagement." Augustus stepped aside. As they walked to the carriage, Catherine's hands were steady. "Well managed," her aunt said quietly. Catherine said nothing. But as the carriage pulled away, she allowed herself one glance back. Augustus stood in the doorway, watching. She had survived his dismissal, his predictions of her failure. And now she was visible again. Not as his secret. Not as his kept woman. As herself. Spring arrived, and with it, a fuller social calendar. Lady Pembroke, despite her professed frailty, maintained an active presence in society. Catherine accompanied her to dinners, musicales, garden parties, always in the background, always useful, always appropriately invisible. But not hidden. Not secret. She was present. Acknowledged. Real. It was enough. Or so she told herself. She first noticed Christopher Kingsley at Lady Haverstock's garden party. He was standing somewhat apart from the main gathering, examining the roses with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than polite pretense. Tall, perhaps 40, with dark hair going silver at the temples. Well-dressed but not ostentatious. She would not have given him a second thought, except that he looked up and met her eyes. And smiled. Not the practiced smile of social obligation. Something warmer. More curious. Catherine looked away quickly, uncomfortable with the attention. "That is Mr. Kingsley," Lady Pembroke said later, having followed Catherine's glance. "Viscount Ashworth's younger brother. Made his fortune in railways, though he had family money to begin with. Widowed these past 3 years." Catherine said nothing, but her aunt continued anyway. "He is considered quite eligible, though he shows little interest in the usual pursuits. Bit of an eccentric. Prefers books to hunting, conversation to cards. Some consider him odd." "I see." "He is also," Lady Pembroke added delicately, "not easily shocked." Catherine understood the implication, but she did not let herself hope. Their first conversation happened by accident. Catherine was in the library at the Haverstock House, seeking a moment's quiet during another musicale. She had not expected anyone else to retreat there. "Forgive me," Mr. Kingsley said from the doorway. "I did not mean to intrude." "You are not intruding. I was only," she gestured vaguely, "escaping." His eyes held amusement. "As was I. Mrs. Haverstock's soprano is enthusiastic." Despite herself, Catherine smiled. "Enthusiastic is kind. I am trying to be charitable." He moved into the room, examining the shelves. "Though I suspect we have both heard worse." "Undoubtedly." They stood in companionable silence for a moment. "You are Lady Pembroke's companion," he said finally. "Not a question." "Yes. Miss Goodwin." "Kingsley. Though you seem to already know that." He pulled a volume from the shelf, examined it, replaced it. "Your aunt speaks highly of you." Catherine was surprised. "Does she?" "She mentioned your proficiency with languages. And your intelligence, though she phrased it more diplomatically." "That sounds like her." "She also mentioned," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "that you have recently returned to society after a period of absence." Catherine's shoulders tensed. "She told you that?" "Only in the context of saying that anyone who judged you for it was a fool." He looked at her directly. "I am inclined to agree with her." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. "You know nothing about me," she said quietly. "True. But I know something of the world. And I suspect your absence was not entirely voluntary." Catherine said nothing. "Forgive me," he said after a moment. "I have made you uncomfortable. That was not my intention." "You have not." She met his eyes. "You have been more honest than most people dare to be." Honesty seems in short supply in these gatherings. It does. They stood there, two people finding unexpected refuge in a library, while the soprano's voice climbed toward notes it could not quite reach. "Would you recommend any of these volumes?" Kingsley asked, gesturing to the shelves. And just like that, the moment of tension passed. They talked of books, of poets, of whether Byron was brilliant or merely dramatic. He listened when she spoke, asked her opinion, did not condescend or correct. When Lady Pembroke came to find her, Catherine realized an hour had passed. "I have enjoyed our conversation, Miss Goodwin," Kingsley said as she prepared to leave. "As have I. Perhaps we might continue it another time." It was not quite an invitation, not quite a promise, but it was something. Over the following weeks, they encountered each other regularly. Always in public settings, always appropriately. But Kingsley had a way of finding her in crowded rooms, of engaging her in conversation that felt genuine rather than obligatory. He asked about her opinions on current events, her thoughts on literature, her views on education reform. He never asked about her past. And when others whispered, because of course they whispered, he ignored them entirely. Once, at a dinner party, Catherine overheard two women speculating about her background. About why a woman of her age was only now appearing in society as a paid companion. Kingsley appeared at her elbow moments later. "Miss Goodwin, I was hoping to get your perspective on something," he said, loud enough for the whispering women to hear. "You mentioned last week that you had read Wordsworth's new collection. I have just acquired it and would value your opinion." He spoke to her as though she were worth listening to, as though her mind mattered, as though her past, whatever it might be, was less interesting than her present. Catherine found herself looking forward to social engagements for the first time in years. Not for the spectacle, but for the possibility of conversation. Of being seen, truly seen, by someone who seemed genuinely curious about who she was. "He is courting you," Lady Pembroke observed one evening. "He is being kind." "Catherine." Her aunt's voice was dry. "I am old, not blind." The man looks at you as though you are the only interesting person in the room. He is courting you. Slowly, respectfully, but unmistakably. Lady Pembroke paused. The question is whether you will allow it. Catherine did not answer, but she thought about it long into the night. Augustus noticed. Of course he noticed. Catherine saw it in the way his gaze followed her across crowded rooms. The way his jaw tightened when Christopher Kingsley appeared at her side. The way he found excuses to position himself near their conversations. She had not spoken to him directly since that night at Lady Haverstock's musicale months ago. They moved in the same circles now, but as distant acquaintances. Polite nods. Nothing more. Until the evening at Lord Marcham's dinner party. Catherine was in the garden, taking air between courses. The dining room had been stifling, the conversation tedious. She stood near the fountain, listening to the water, enjoying the solitude. Miss Goodwin. She turned to find Augustus approaching. Alone. Her first instinct was to leave. But she held her ground. Your Grace. He stopped a careful distance away. Close enough to speak privately, far enough to maintain propriety. You look well, he said. Thank you. Your aunt has been generous, taking you in. Catherine said nothing. I have seen you, he continued, in Mr. Kingsley's company. Frequently. Have you? He is aware, I assume, of your circumstances. Her hands tightened on her reticule. My circumstances are no longer your concern. Catherine. His voice softened, taking on the tone he had once used to coax her into agreement. I am trying to protect you. Kingsley may seem kind now, but when he learns the truth. He knows. Augustus blinked. I beg your pardon. He knows about my past. Not the details, perhaps, but enough. She met his eyes steadily. And he has chosen to continue our acquaintance regardless. For a moment, Augustus looked genuinely surprised. Then something darker crossed his face. I see. And what, precisely, did you tell him? Nothing that was untrue. Did you tell him it was your choice? That you accepted my offer willingly? I told him, Catherine said quietly, that I made a mistake, and that I corrected it. Augustus's composure cracked. A mistake. Is that what you call it now? What would you call it? I would call it an arrangement that benefited you considerably. One you abandoned out of pride and foolishness. I abandoned it, Catherine corrected, because I deserved better. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Better? And you think Kingsley is better? A man who would court a woman with your reputation. A man who would court me openly. Yes. He is using you, Catherine. Playing the magnanimous hero. Once the novelty wears off. You do not know him. I know men. Augustus stepped closer. I know what we want and how we justify it. He is no different than I was. He simply has a different approach. He is nothing like you. The words landed like a slap. Augustus's expression hardened. Be careful, Catherine. Kingsley may seem progressive now, but society has a long memory. When the whispers become too loud, when his family objects, when the scandal becomes inconvenient, he will abandon you. Just as you abandoned me. I did not abandon you. I left. The result is the same. No, Catherine said firmly. It is not. I left because you would not give me what I deserved. If Christopher chooses to leave someday, that will be his choice. But at least he is choosing me in daylight. At least I exist to him beyond closed doors. Augustus's jaw worked. For a moment, she thought he might say something cruel, something designed to wound. Instead, he said, he will hear things about you. If he has not already, then he will hear them. And you think that will not matter? I think, Catherine said carefully, that a man worth having will judge me by who I am now, not by what I was persuaded to accept when I had nothing. Persuaded. Augustus's voice went cold. I forced nothing on you. You did not have to. You simply made certain I understood I had no other options. That is a lie. Is it? She held his gaze. You told me I was nothing. That no one else would want me. That I should be grateful for your attention. Were those lies, Augustus? Or were they simply the truth you needed me to believe? He said nothing. I thought so, Catherine said quietly. She turned to leave. He will not marry you, Augustus called after her. Men like Kingsley do not marry women like you. Catherine paused, but did not turn around. Perhaps not, she said. But if he does not, it will not be because I disappeared for him. It will not be because I made myself smaller, or quieter, or less. And that, Your Grace, is the difference. She walked back toward the house, leaving him standing alone in the garden. Her hands were shaking, but her step was steady. Inside, she found Christopher waiting in the hall, 2 glasses of wine in hand. I saw him follow you, he said quietly, offering her a glass. Are you all right? Catherine took the wine gratefully. Yes. He studied her face. You are certain? He was attempting to warn me. About you, actually. Christopher's eyebrow rose. Was he? He seems to think you will eventually abandon me when society's judgment becomes inconvenient. Does he? Catherine sipped her wine, gathering courage. Will you? Christopher was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured but firm. I have no interest in your past, Miss Goodwin. I cannot change it, and you should not have to apologize for it. What interests me is the woman standing before me now, intelligent, resilient, honest. That woman is worth knowing, worth choosing. He paused, then added, I am not courting who you were. I am choosing who you are becoming. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. Not the desperate gratitude she had once felt for Augustus's attention. Something steadier, stronger. Thank you, she said quietly. No thanks necessary. He smiled. Though I confess, I am curious what dire warnings the Duke issued. Only that you would eventually see reason and abandon me to my deserved obscurity. I see. Christopher considered this. Well, I have always been somewhat unreasonable. Ask anyone. Despite everything, Catherine laughed. They returned to the party together, side by side, visible to anyone who cared to look. And across the room, Augustus watched. The courtship progressed slowly, deliberately. Christopher called on Lady Pembroke's house at proper hours, bearing flowers and invitations to exhibitions, lectures, afternoon concerts. He sent Catherine books they had discussed, with notes in the margins where he agreed or disagreed with her opinions. He introduced her to his friends, scholars, writers, reformers. People who cared more about ideas than pedigree. They welcomed her without interrogation, accepted her presence as Christopher's guest without demanding explanations. It was so different from before that sometimes Catherine had to remind herself it was real. 3 months into their acquaintance, Christopher invited her to walk in Hyde Park. It was the fashionable hour, the time when society paraded itself, when visibility mattered most. Catherine hesitated. Are you certain? She asked. He understood immediately what she was asking. Very certain. They walked the main path, his arm offered, her hand resting lightly upon it. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Catherine felt the weight of stares, heard the whispers that followed in their wake. Christopher ignored all of it. He pointed out a family of ducks, debated the merits of Constable versus Turner, asked her opinion on a new lending library proposed for Bloomsbury. He spoke to her as though they were alone, as though the watching eyes did not exist. You are not concerned, Catherine said finally, about what people are saying. I am aware of what they are saying. I simply do not care. He glanced at her. Does it trouble you? I am not accustomed to it. To being talked about. To being talked about while standing beside someone. She looked straight ahead. Usually, I am the secret being whispered, not the woman on a gentleman's arm. Christopher stopped walking, turned to face her fully, there in the middle of the path, with half of society watching. Catherine, he said quietly, I have no interest in keeping you secret. If we are to continue this, and I very much hope we will, you should know that I do not do things by half measures. I will not hide you. I will not be ashamed of you. And I will not tolerate anyone who suggests I should be. Her throat tightened. Even when they say I am ruined, unsuitable. Even then. Your family. My family will adjust. Or they will not. But they will not dictate whom I choose. Choose. That word again. So simple. So extraordinary. Why? Catherine asked. Why me? You could have anyone. Someone without complications. Christopher smiled. I do not want someone without complications. I want someone interesting. Someone who has lived, who has made mistakes and learned from them. Someone who knows the difference between pretty words and real affection. He paused. Someone like you. Catherine could not speak. I am not rescuing you, he continued. I want to be clear about that. You have already rescued yourself. I am simply asking if you might be interested in building something new. Together. In daylight. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who asked rather than demanded. Who offered rather than controlled. Who saw her not as a project or a secret or a convenience, but as a person worth choosing. Yes, she said. I would be interested in that. His smile widened. Good. They resumed walking. Behind them, society continued to whisper. But for the first time in years, Catherine did not care. A week later, Christopher formally requested permission to court her. He did so in Lady Pembroke's drawing room, with Catherine present, not as a matter to be decided without her, but as a conversation that included her. I wish to make my intentions clear, he said to Lady Pembroke. I am courting your niece with the intention of marriage, should she be amenable. Lady Pembroke's eyebrows rose. You are aware of her circumstances. I am aware that Miss Goodwin has lived a life before now. As have we all. Christopher's tone was firm but polite. I am interested in her future, which I hope may include mine. Her aunt looked at Catherine. And you? What do you want? It was the first time anyone had asked her that question. Not what she needed. Not what she could accept. What she wanted. Catherine took a breath. I want to be certain. Of myself. Of this. She met Christopher's eyes. I have made poor choices before. I do not wish to repeat them. Then we will take whatever time you need, Christopher said simply. There is no urgency. Only hope. Lady Pembroke studied them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. Very well. You may call on Catherine here. Properly. No more than 3 times a week, and never unaccompanied. I may be modern, but I am not reckless. Christopher grinned. Understood, my lady. The season continued. Christopher courted Catherine openly, publicly, with clear intention. He brought her to the theatre, not a private box, but seats where anyone could see them. He escorted her to gallery openings, introduced her to his brother, invited her to dinner parties with his closest friends. He made no secret of her. And gradually, tentatively, society began to accept it. Not everyone, of course. There were those who whispered, who turned away, who made their disapproval known. But there were also those who followed Christopher's lead, who greeted Catherine politely, who included her in conversations, who treated her as though her past did not define her entirely. It was not perfect. But it was real. And Catherine, who had spent so long being invisible, was learning what it meant to be seen without shame. One evening, leaving the opera, they encountered Augustus. He was with a young woman, blonde, beautiful, draped in diamonds. His intended bride, according to the gossip. The four of them stood frozen for a moment in the crowded lobby. Augustus's eyes moved from Catherine to Christopher, then back again. His expression was carefully neutral, but Catherine saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "Miss Goodwin," he said finally. "Mr. Kingsley." Christopher inclined his head. "Your Grace." The young woman on Augustus's arm looked between them, sensing tension but not understanding it. "I trust you are well," Augustus said to Catherine. "Very well, thank you." He waited, as though expecting her to elaborate, to explain, to justify. She said nothing more. After a moment, he moved on, the blonde beauty chattering at his side. Christopher squeezed Catherine's hand gently. "All right?" he asked. Catherine watched Augustus disappear into the crowd. Once, that man had been her entire world. Now he was simply another face in a crowded room. "Yes," she said. "I am perfectly all right." And she meant it. Augustus married in June. The wedding was everything society expected: grand, expensive, impeccably orchestrated. The bride was lovely and well-connected, her dowry substantial, her pedigree impeccable. Catherine read about it in the morning paper while taking breakfast with her aunt. The Duke of wed Miss Letitia Hartwell yesterday at St. George's, Hanover Square, in a ceremony attended by 300 of society's most distinguished. She set down the paper calmly. "You are not distressed?" Lady Pembroke asked, watching her carefully. "No," Catherine said, and realized it was true. "I am not." She felt nothing. Not jealousy, not regret, not even satisfaction. Augustus had done what he always intended to do, married suitably, secured his line, fulfilled his obligations. She hoped, distantly, that the new Duchess knew what she had agreed to. A month later, Catherine encountered the Duchess at Lady Wexford's garden party. The young woman was even lovelier up close, with flawless skin and artfully arranged curls. She smiled constantly, a bright, practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Catherine recognized that smile. She had worn it herself once. The Duchess was surrounded by admirers, accepting congratulations with gracious nods. Augustus stood nearby, possessive and proud, displaying his acquisition. Their eyes met briefly across the lawn. The Duchess's smile faltered, just for a moment. Then she turned back to her companions, the smile firmly in place. Catherine looked away. That evening, Christopher arrived for dinner. Afterward, they sat in the garden while Lady Pembroke played cards inside. "You saw him today," Christopher said. "Not a question." "Yes. And his wife." "And?" Catherine considered. "She looked exactly as I must have looked in the beginning. Grateful. Eager to please. Believing herself fortunate. She may be happy. Perhaps." Catherine plucked a leaf from the hedge beside her. "But I doubt he has changed. And if he has not changed, then she will learn what I learned. That his affection comes with conditions. That visibility is earned through compliance. That love, to him, is another form of ownership." Christopher was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it? The time you spent with him?" "I regret what I gave up. My dignity. My sense of self. The months I spent disappearing." She looked at him. "But I do not regret leaving." "Good." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of evening settling over the city. "He tried to speak to me today," Christopher said finally. "At my club." Catherine stiffened. "What did he say?" "He suggested, delicately, that I was making a mistake. That certain women, regardless of their current circumstances, carry their pasts with them. That society would eventually exact a price for my charitable impulses." "I see." "I told him," Christopher continued calmly, "that I had no interest in his opinions, and that if he approached me again on the subject, I would be significantly less polite." Despite herself, Catherine smiled. You did not. I did. He looked quite affronted. Christopher took her hand. Catherine, you should know, there will always be people like him. People who believe your past defines you. Who think redemption is impossible, that mistakes are permanent stains. I know. But they are wrong. His grip tightened slightly. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to do about it. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. 2 months later, at the Cheltenham ball, Catherine watched Augustus from across the room. He was dancing with his wife, their movements perfectly synchronized. To any observer, they looked ideal, the powerful Duke and his beautiful Duchess. But Catherine saw what others might miss. The way the Duchess's smile was just a fraction too bright. The way she watched her husband's face constantly, adjusting her expression to match his mood. The way she seemed to be performing rather than existing. The way Catherine herself had once performed. Augustus said something, and the Duchess laughed, too quickly, too eagerly. Catherine felt a pang of pity. Then Christopher appeared at her elbow, offering champagne. Wool gathering, he asked. Observing. He followed her gaze, understood immediately. You cannot save her, you know. She must realize it herself, as you did. I know. Catherine accepted the glass. But I remember what it feels like. To believe you should be grateful for attention that costs you everything. She may never leave. No, Catherine agreed. She may not. Many do not. Christopher studied her face. But you did. Yes. That took remarkable courage. Catherine shook her head. It took desperation. And clarity. And the realization that being alone was better than being invisible. Still. He raised his glass slightly. Courage. They drank. Across the room, Augustus glanced over. His eyes met Catherine's, held for just a moment. She saw it then, the flicker of something in his expression. Not regret, precisely, but a kind of recognition. An acknowledgment that she had slipped beyond his control, his predictions, his power. He had told her she would fail. She had not. He had told her no one else would want her. He had been wrong. And now he was locked into exactly the kind of marriage he had always planned, appropriate, advantageous, empty. While she stood beside a man who chose her openly. Catherine inclined her head politely, the greeting one might give a distant acquaintance, and turned away. She did not need his approval. She did not need his acknowledgment. She did not need anything from him at all. Later that night, preparing for bed, Catherine looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was different from the one who had sat in that dim parlor 18 months ago, agreeing to disappear. This woman had lines around her eyes from genuine laughter, had hands that knew work, had a spine that no longer curved in apology. This woman existed, and that, Catherine thought as she extinguished the lamp, was worth everything it had cost to become her. Christopher proposed on a Tuesday afternoon in October. There was no grand gesture, no orchestrated moment before an audience. They were walking in the gardens at Kew, discussing a lecture they had attended on botanical classification, when he simply stopped and turned to her. Catherine, he said, I would like to marry you. She stared at him. Now. You are asking now. Why not now? He smiled. We are alone, we are happy, and I have been wanting to ask for weeks. This seemed as good a moment as any. We are discussing ferns. We were discussing ferns. Now we are discussing our future. He took her hand. Marry me. Not because you need security, or protection, or saving. But because we make each other better. Because we are honest with one another. Because I love you, and I would very much like to spend the rest of my life walking through gardens with you, arguing about plants. Catherine felt her throat tighten. Christopher. I know you are cautious. I know you have reason to be. So I will ask you plainly, Do you love me? She had been afraid of this question. Afraid of the vulnerability it required, the risk of trusting her own feelings again. But standing there in the autumn sunlight, his hand warm in hers, the answer was clear. Yes, she said. I do. Do you trust me? Yes. Do you believe I will stand beside you? Publicly, permanently, without conditions? Yes. Then marry me. He squeezed her hand gently. Please. Catherine looked at him, this man who had seen her past and chosen her anyway. Who had courted her in daylight, introduced her to his world, made space for her voice. Who asked rather than demanded. Who offered partnership rather than possession. Yes, she said. I will marry you. His face broke into a grin. Truly. Truly. He kissed her there, in the garden, where anyone might see. And Catherine kissed him back, without fear, without shame, without the need to hide. The engagement was announced in the Times the following week. Mr. Christopher Kingsley to Miss Catherine Goodwin, niece of Lady Pembroke. The gossip was immediate. Of course it was. Some congratulated Christopher. Others whispered their disapproval. A few cut Catherine directly, making their judgment clear. But far more surprised her. Lady Haverstock sent a note of congratulations. Several of Christopher's friends hosted a dinner in their honor. Even some of society's more conservative members offered stiff but genuine well wishes. Catherine realized that her redemption had not come from pretending her past did not exist. It came from refusing to be defined by it. Lady Pembroke hosted an engagement party, small, tasteful, carefully curated. Catherine wore a dress of deep blue silk, her mother's locket at her throat. She stood beside Christopher, receiving guests, visible and acknowledged. At one point, she found herself near the window, watching the party with a sense of unreality. Having doubts. Lady Pembroke appeared at her elbow. No. Only, marveling. At what? At how different this is from before. Catherine gestured at the room. Then, I was hidden. Now, I am. Chosen, her aunt finished. Openly. As you should have been from the start. I made poor choices. You made choices with the options you had. Lady Pembroke's voice was firm. And when you realized they were wrong, you corrected them. That is not weakness, Catherine. That is strength. Not everyone sees it that way. No, her aunt agreed. But the people who matter do. And those who do not matter, do not matter. Catherine smiled. When did you become a philosopher? I have always been practical. Lady Pembroke's eyes softened. You have done well, child. Your mother would be proud. It was the kindest thing her aunt had ever said to her. The wedding was set for December. Catherine and Christopher planned it together, a small ceremony, immediate family and close friends only. No spectacle, no performance. Just honest vows, honestly made. In the weeks leading up to it, Catherine found herself reflecting on the woman she had been. The woman who had believed love required erasure. Who had thought visibility was too much to ask for. Who had convinced herself that being chosen in shadows was better than being alone in the light. That woman seemed very far away now. 1 week before the wedding, Catherine received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, feminine, careful. She opened it curiously. Miss Goodwin, you do not know me, but I am acquainted with your situation. I am writing to ask if what I have heard is true, that you were once kept by a gentleman of rank, and that you left of your own accord. I find myself in similar circumstances. I am told I should be grateful. That I am protected. That I should not ask for more than I am given. But I wonder if there might be more. If someone like me might also choose to leave. To start again. I do not expect a response. I only wanted you to know that your story has given me hope. A friend. Catherine read the letter 3 times. Then she wrote back. Dear friend. What you have heard is true. I left, and it was the hardest and best decision I have ever made. You ask if there might be more. I cannot answer that for you. But I can tell you this, love that requires you to disappear is not love. And you deserve to be seen. The path forward will not be easy. There will be hardship, judgment, uncertainty. But there will also be freedom. The freedom to exist without permission. To choose yourself. Only you can decide if that freedom is worth the cost. But if you choose it, know that you will not be the first. And you will not be alone. With hope for your future, Miss Catherine Goodwin. She posted the letter that afternoon. The wedding day arrived cold and clear. Catherine dressed in cream silk, simple and elegant. No veil, she had nothing to hide. No elaborate train, she had no need for spectacle. Just herself, choosing her future. Christopher waited for her at the altar, his eyes bright. When she reached him, he took her hands. "Ready?" he whispered. "Yes," she said. "I am." The ceremony was brief. The vows were traditional, but when Catherine spoke them, they felt revolutionary. To have and to hold. Not to be hidden. For better or for worse. Acknowledged in both. Till death do us part. Chosen, permanently, without conditions. When Christopher kissed her, the small gathering applauded. And Catherine realized, this was not a happy ending because she had found a husband. It was a happy ending because she had found herself first. At the wedding breakfast, Lady Pembroke raised a glass. "To Catherine," she said, "who learned that being loved in the light is worth more than being kept in the dark." "To Catherine," the guests echoed. Catherine met Christopher's eyes across the table. He smiled, warm, genuine, proud. And she smiled back. She had been told she was nothing without a man's protection. She had been told no one would want her. She had been told she should be grateful for invisibility. She had been told she would fail. But she had not failed. She had survived. She had rebuilt. She had learned her own worth. And now, she stood in daylight, beside someone who chose her freely. The happy ending was not the marriage. The happy ending was the moment she had refused to remain unseen. Everything after that was simply life, honest, visible, hers. Years later, Catherine would sometimes think of that dim parlor where it all began. The Duke's offer. Her acceptance. The choice that had seemed so practical, so necessary. She would think of the woman she had been, lonely, uncertain, willing to disappear for the illusion of love. And she would feel gratitude. Not for the experience itself, but for what she had learned from it. That love without respect is possession. That generosity with conditions is control. That being chosen in secret is not being chosen at all. She had learned what she deserved. And she had claimed it. Some stories end with rescue. With a man saving a woman from ruin. This story ended with a woman saving herself. And building a life, visible, honest, whole, from the pieces. That, Catherine knew, was the only ending worth having. Some loves are never spoken of, others are remembered. She was never difficult to love. She was simply loving someone who benefited from her being unseen. If this story stayed with you, if it unsettled you more than you expected, then you already know why her ending matters. Like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from, and what time of day met you here. Thank you for listening. And if you know someone who needs this story, share it with them.